So this lesson depends on the previous lesson. I will assume that you have already read the passage on path dependence. You'll find the full passage below this video. So here's the question. I will say, pause the video now, read the question, review the passage if you have to, come up with your own answer, and then we'll discuss it. Okay, so we'll talk about this question now. What is the primary purpose of the passage? Now, the primary purpose question, it's always a good idea when you're reading to figure out the primary purpose of a passage. Even when you're doing reading outside of stuff that you're preparing for the test, for example, you're just reading articles in newspapers, magazines, journals, always ask yourself, what is the primary purpose? Why is the author writing this? What is the point they want me to get? You should always be in that mode of analyzing it. First of all, because the primary purpose question is a reasonably common question. It won't appear with every passage, but it is more frequent than some of the other questions. But more importantly, even if they don't ask the primary purpose, if you understand the primary purpose, that will make so many of the detailed questions much easier to understand. And so that's why it's important to understand this question type. So for this passage, what is the primary purpose of the passage? A, to explain the extensive role of chance in shaping the economy. It is true that anything that is contingent is dependent on chance. And it is true that it does seem that, at least for some products, there is this path dependence thing that plays out. So there's an initial chance event, and then it follows that one event, even though it started by chance. So, for example, the QWERTY keyboard, why this in terms of any others? Well, it's the one that we started with. And so by chance, we started with that, and that's the one we're still using. So it is true that chance does play some role, but we're not making the claim that every single product in the economy has this kind of pattern. We're discussing this as one pattern. We don't know how widespread it is. And so extensive role of chance seems to suggest that almost every product out there would be governed by this pattern. And the passage is making no such claim that this is a universal pattern. It's just talking about this one particular pattern that governs some products. So this is far too extensive, so we're going to reject A. B, to explore an economic pattern that governs the development of certain products. All right, this is much more measured and modest. So it is true that path dependence is an economic pattern, and it does govern the development of some products, the QWERTY keyboard being an example. So this is promising. There's nothing extreme about this. This is very factual and very grounded. It does sound like what the passage might be about. So we'll return to this. C, to argue for adherence to the QWERTY keyboard design. No, the passage is not primarily about the QWERTY keyboard. It's not saying, the point of the passage is not to say the QWERTY keyboard is the best. So that is not correct. D, to demonstrate that product quality is not a central criteria in consumer choices. Very, very interesting. So it is true that if that inertia builds up, and so people are choosing one thing rather than another, it may be that there are occasions that people by habit are choosing the thing they're more familiar with rather than choosing a higher quality item. It is true that that may happen sometimes, but again, this is a little more extreme. Like A, this is quite extreme. Product quality is not a central criteria in consumer choices. Surely there must be some instances in which consumers decide, all right, these two things are similar in price, but this one is higher quality, I'm going to buy this one. Certainly, product quality must at some level be important in some products. Notice that everything we're doing right now, we're kind of speculating, we're outside of the passage. The passage does not discuss it at all. The passage only discusses that in certain instances, there may be occasions in which product quality is not the most important thing. Okay, but to generalize this and say it is not a central criteria in consumer choices over the scale of the whole economy, that's far too broad. So we'll reject D. E, to analyze the critical economic importance of priority in the release of a product. All right, this is interesting because if path dependence is playing out, and it doesn't govern every product, but it governs some, it may be the case, it absolutely may be the case that if I release my product first before my competitors, that might give me an edge, that there might be just this advantage. I might catch this pattern of path dependence, and then my product will play out and be the most popular simply because it was first. So it is conceivable that this might work, that this might be true for certain products. But here's the really important thing. You could say that maybe this is an inference. We could say maybe it is a belief that we could attribute to someone, say like James Mahoney. We could attribute it to someone in the passage. But the fact that it's something that we could infer does not make it the primary purpose of the passage. The primary purpose of the passage is something that has to be discussed quite explicitly. And nowhere in the passage do they say quite explicitly, if you and your competitor are going to release something at the same time, it's so important that you get your item out first. There's nothing like that in the passage. And so this might be an inference, but it's not the purpose of the passage. So we're going to eliminate that. And B, even though it's very modest and understated, is actually a very good way to state the primary purpose of the passage: to explore an economic pattern, the pattern of path dependence, that governs the development of certain products. B is the best answer here.